Alicia Garza had been organizing for decades before she co-created Black Lives Matter, which has, of course, spread globally. Now she's come out with her first book entitled The Purpose of Power: How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. Alicia, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
In the book, you write, every social movement I've ever participated in has been infected by patriarchy. Can you tell us about the challenges you faced in co-creating Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think the major thing for us to pay attention to as we are trying to create the world that we don't live in yet is that sometimes we bring dynamics along with us that don't serve us. And some of those dynamics are the ones that exist in society right now, where there are people who are being left out and left behind, mostly by rigged rules, right, that keep the playing field uneven. And when it comes to the relationship, right, of the leadership of women, the leadership of queer people, of trans people, of poor people, of people with disabilities, and people who are immigrants to this country, we have to make sure that when we come together to accomplish something new, that we are in fact moving new dynamics forward. And so making sure that those of us who have been kept from leadership positions, those of us who have been kept from power, are actually being included in a way that hasn't happened before. So that's what I'm talking about in the book. I'm talking about ways in which sometimes as we are trying to change the world, we can replicate some of the same dynamics that we want to get rid of.
And you also write about forming unlikely coalitions. How do you gain connections and organize with people you don't necessarily agree with during these divided times?
I've had many wonderful experiences coming together with people for whom we don't necessarily share everything in common, but we share enough in common to get things done together. And as we move into this next period where our political landscape is fraught with divisions, most of which are manufactured, it's important for us to pay attention to what connects us. So even though there are a lot of differences amongst us, it's important for us to try to look for the things that we share in common as well, even if it's not the same. And for me, when we're talking about building power, changing the relationships of power, changing the balance of power, it requires a lot more of us than we think. And so we should be paying attention to how it is that we expand our team and figure out how we move forward together.
And finding that common ground. It's been nearly a year since George Floyd was killed. How do you see the progress of social change since that happened?
Listen, in my lifetime, I have seen our communities be gaslighted time and time again. You know, police violence and police brutality is not a new phenomenon in this country, but social media is. And just here in Oakland, what we saw was that, you know, when Oscar Grant was murdered just a few blocks from my home, the way that we knew what actually happened was because people who were on that BART train captured it on their cell phones, and then they posted it to social media. And we were able to use evidence like that to be able to counter the common narratives that come out of these kinds of situations. It makes a difference that this movement, right, has created more opportunity, more room, more conversations around how we address public safety in the first place. Again, this work is not new, but because of the digital spaces that we now have, more and more people have access to information, and that is something that is significant. When 7 years ago, when we started Black Lives Matter, I can tell you it was controversial. 7 years ago, I can tell you that activism was not something that most people saw themselves a part of. And now we've seen a lot of changes, both culturally and policy-wise. And it's time to keep moving those cultural changes forward and the policy changes forward. We have to undo the rigged rules that have kept it so that people are not being held accountable. Police are not being held accountable when they commit crimes in our communities. We have to change the rigged rules that make it so that families who have their loved ones stolen from them never actually get a sense that there is consequences. And certainly, never get a sense that the people who are supposed to be keeping us safe are actually being held accountable to those standards. And so there have been a lot of advances made. And of course, I wouldn't be an organizer if I didn't believe that we could do more, and we must do more, given what we've seen even over the last 2 weeks, where over a dozen people have been murdered by the police, including right here in Alameda. So it is important for us to keep moving this forward. And the way that we do that is by being courageous and bold. What we know is that what we're doing right now is not working. And so we cannot continue to tinker around the edges with training and, increased data collection. Those things are important, but at the end of the day, we have to think about how we're investing our resources and where we could better invest our resources so that our communities have the things that they need to live well and have the things that they need to live dignified lives. Once that has been accomplished, I can tell you, people do feel safer when they have the things that they need to live well, whether it be housing or access to healthcare, access to education, and really access to their government and to decision making. So we've gone a long way, and we still have a long way to go. And I'm excited for what's coming next.
Yeah, let's talk about that moving forward aspect. You left Black Lives Matter in 2017 to start the Black Futures Lab. Now you've released the Build Back Bolder plan for the Biden-Harris administration. Can you talk about the pillars of that plan?
Absolutely. Well, the Build Back Bolder plan is a Black mandate for the Biden-Harris administration. And essentially what it is doing is it is setting the terms and setting the floor for what change looks like in this moment. We started off this year with an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, where people stormed the Capitol angry about the fact that Black voters had exercised power in such a way that we changed the composition of Congress, that we changed who was in the White House, that we changed the balance of power in the United States Senate, which is incredibly important to undoing the rules that have been rigged against our communities for a long time. And now we need to set the pathway for what legislative change looks like, not just in Congress, but in municipalities and in states as well. Because we know that we're up against a very powerful movement that has a very organized agenda. And they are moving that agenda through elections. They are moving that agenda through state legislatures and through city halls throughout the nation. Our Build Back Bolder mandate really looks at the core priorities of the Biden-Harris administration, and it gives a legislative roadmap for how to improve the lives of Black communities. And I can tell you that improving the lives of Black communities is good for America and improves the lives of all communities, because what it does is it goes to the heart of the reasons why resources are being distributed unevenly, and it distributes them more evenly. So from things like COVID-19 relief and recovery, to economic security, to climate change, to racial justice. It's important that we start to create and provide a clear roadmap for how it is that we make America great for the first time. And we're very excited to be a part of this process. We've been in conversations with the administration, but bigger than that, we've been organizing our communities around this agenda. I can tell you in the last election cycle, we talked to more than 2 million Black voters across the country, and the results were clear. Black voters wanted to see a change. We want to see the results of what happens when we show up to the polls and we bring our protest. And so what that looks like is making sure that we're raising the minimum wage. It looks like in relationship to COVID-19 relief and recovery, that we're not just getting a one-time stimulus check, but actually, given the devastation, not just that this pandemic has created, but the lack of infrastructure prior to the pandemic to allow communities to be resilient in the face of crisis. We need more infusions of resources into our communities to address not just the deep hole we're in over the last year, but the deep hole we've been in for the last 2 decades at least. We also want to make sure that we are rooting out white nationalism everywhere it is found, whether it be in police departments or whether it be in our workplaces, whether it be in our own government. It's important that we are setting the stage for what change looks like, and we are absolutely doing that with the Build Back Bolder mandate. And if you want to find out more about that, you can visit our website at 2, thefuture.org, and you can sign on right now to help make sure that some of these changes become a reality.
And you brought up Alameda County earlier. You also talked about resources a lot. Oakland is using part of the $192 million from the American Rescue Plan on restoring police services in a move Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf supports. What do you think of the city using part of the stimulus package on OPD?
You know, I think it's absolutely unacceptable, and I think it shows that the mayor is out of touch with what's happening in her own city. You know, when I walk down the street every day, I see growing camps of people who can no longer afford to have a roof over their heads. There are an incredible amount of people who are living under bridges next to freeways. And so the idea that what we would do with federal stimulus dollars is to invest those dollars into policing in this community is absolutely unacceptable. And I will say it also lacks imagination and it lacks courage. What we need in this city is to refund communities in this city that have been defunded, whether it be a lack of resources for schools, whether it be a lack of resources for affordable and quality housing, whether it be a lack of resources for jobs. We have a lot of priorities in the city that must be addressed. And now that there are resources coming to this city, again, it lacks imagination to just invest those resources in the place where a large majority of our resources are already being invested for things like tanks, for things like military grade weapons, for things like overtime for policing. Again, we have to be more creative here and we have to be bolder. And it's unfortunate and unacceptable that there is a lack of courage and vision from the mayor's office.
So on the flip side, on the other side of the bay, San Francisco Mayor London Breed came out with a plan to reinvest $120 million from police into black communities. The plan will put money into everything from housing and a guaranteed income program to workforce training and development programs. What do you think of this plan?
I mean, again, I think it's something that is very interesting. I think that, you know, Mayor Breed is looking at new ways to reinvent San Francisco in the image of families like her own who are struggling to hold on to living in the city that they helped to build. And what we see across the Bay Area is that our communities are changing, and they're changing in such a way where they're becoming inaccessible and unaffordable for those of us who make this city great. And so I'm proud that she is taking this kind of step. I'm proud that she's taking this kind of initiative. And I can tell you that these types of initiatives are the ones that we should be looking at here in Oakland. They have imagination, they're innovative, and they're really looking at how is it that we hold true to the spirit of this city and make sure that everybody in this city has a chance to thrive.
Alicia Garza, thank you so much for your time. Great to talk to you, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you so much for having me.